Do you think we're in an AI bubble right now?
I do. There's a tremendous amount of money that is not clearly sustainable.
Artificial intelligence is transforming everything, from the way we work to the way we think. But as billions are poured into AI startups and trillion-dollar companies race to dominate the field, a deeper question looms. Is this innovation serving society or exploiting it? My name is James Lee, and you're watching Beyond the Headlines on Breaking Points. Over the past 2 years, AI has become the fastest growing sector in history, now worth over $390 billion, with projections topping $3.5 trillion by the next decade, certain to reshape industries, upend the job market, and concentrate unprecedented power in the hands of a few billionaires and private companies. But beyond the glossy demos are growing concerns about ethics, transparency, and who really benefits. Closed source systems like OpenAI and Anthropic are locking away their models, while open source advocates warn that their secrecy breeds monopoly, bias, and a potential national security risk. At the same time, economists are warning of an AI bubble, fueled by circular funding, unsustainable valuations, and a government increasingly intertwined with the same companies it's supposed to regulate. So as AI reshapes our economy and society, the question is no longer whether it will change the world, but rather who will own that world when it does. To help us break all of this down, I'm joined today by Travis Oliphant, a pioneer in the scientific computing world. He's the creator of NumPy, as well as now the co-founder of the Open Source AI Foundation, and one of the leading voices for transparency and ethics in artificial intelligence. Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, James. It's great to be here and fantastic introduction. So grateful you're promoting these ideas.
Absolutely. And I want to start with an idea and a point that you've consistently advocated for over the years, which isn't necessarily anti-AI, but rather pro-open source AI. I did see a LinkedIn post, which I thought was very interesting, in which you wrote, quote, "There are a lot of risks that AI is going to produce, including a lot of code that nobody's really reviewed, let alone maintained." So I was wondering if you could unpack that for us. What exactly worries you about this black box of AI, this closed source system, and how serious are these risks if entire systems start, being run on software that no human has ever audited?
Yeah, we're entering an interesting period of history where AI came from the collective work of hundreds of thousands of people cooperating in these open source communities. Everything about AI is rooted on a mountain of open source. And then now all of a sudden there's this opportunity to build models that are and systems to run those models that are now focused on closed source. I don't think that's going to last, but it could. And the problem is now, whereas we had all kinds of eyeballs, we had transparency, we had openness, we had people looking at it, lots of security bugs could be found quickly. And the whole question of what should this do, what should it not do, now it's in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And as humans, we're all just fallible. I mean, the challenge is not that humans are necessarily evil. I actually don't think that's the case. I think it's mostly the incentive alignment, and then the fallibility problem creates and without transparency creates bubbles, creates problems, creates errors, creates of all kinds, and then they can't be corrected as easily. And so, especially when we're talking about intelligence models that are presuming to replace human decision making, that becomes really challenging. We want more human decision making, more distributed human decision making, not fewer models making those decisions.
Yeah,
In
I
the
do
future,
want to talk to you
I'd love
about
to
some of
follow up.
the on the data side, because my take is always, how do you incentivize this kind of good behavior? And one aspect here that I think is talked about in maybe other topics, but not really around AI, is around this kind of national security risk issue, specifically around this idea of data sovereignty, which is that a country
Yes.
should have the right to govern and control the data that's captured within its own borders, and how it's being collected, stored, processed, all these kinds of things under their own jurisdiction. So
Yes.
when it comes to these AI giants, right, these OpenAI, Microsoft, and all these other companies, they seem to be functioning across borders, right? Some with close ties to nations that a lot of people, I think, would find uncomfortable, unsettling. I'm not going to name those specific countries right now, but what risks do you see if nations, including the U.S., lose control of their data to, let's say, foreign entities or even private entities, billionaires, these types of organizations?
It's very critical. I have traditionally not spent a lot of time in government, but over the past year and a half, I've been talking to more and more people in different human health services, national defense, and realizing there is a tremendous acceleration of data moving from government controlled to controlled by some other entity. But essentially, the promise of convenience that AI provides, oh, we're going to do this for you, we're going to be able to provide these solutions for you, all of a sudden more and more data is moving out of the hands of our populist control, popular control, into another entity, and the government's a service of that other entity. Now that has happened over the years. It's sort of always been a challenge whenever you're outsourcing solution to a third party. This has been true for a long time in lots of different areas where, okay, how much of this data is owned and controlled by the government? But it feels like in the past, there was a lot more attention to where does the data reside and who owns it? Whereas that boundary is being blurred right now really quickly in a way that I don't know that can be undone easily without essentially nationalizing those companies that are doing it. At this point, we may be past that already. But I still think we can recover. Governments are huge, but there needs to be an increased focus on owning the data that your citizens essentially are producing. That data should not get in the hands of a private company.
Right. So then what types of actions do you think the government should take, whether is it regulation? Is it
Yeah,
creating
I
different
think there's
incentive
specific
structure?
policies.
What do you think it is? Like, what are some of the
I think the
policies that you would
policy
push
should
for?
be that the data that generated by the citizens or the data that's generated by the government is the government's data. And now and they should be insisting on that. So if a model is trained on those data, that model becomes the property of the organization, becomes the property of the government. So there needs to be a really clear rule so that if a company decides to train a model on data that's the government's, the model becomes the government's property. Like that would be a policy you could implement tomorrow, and just insist that's what happens. So if you train on it, then it's ours. That's kind of a principle I think other people should adopt in their organizations. If people train on my data, it's my model.
And do you think one of the limiting, I guess, factors there in getting that actually implemented would be sort of the financial or economic incentive
Yeah.
structures of not being able to monetize these models?
Well, that's the fear. And I've spent a lifetime helping people see how you monetize open source communities. And there's actually answers to this, fairly straightforward answers, but it does require different policies and different ecosystems to be built out. We're essentially, because of a few business patterns, that in the whole scope of things are going to be a few years of business pattern promotion. Okay, we've had some successful SaaS products over the past 40 years. Okay, that's cool. Government's been around for thousands of years. In that small 40-year window, there are other ways to incentivize, align incentives, and enable monetary transactions to take place to sustain and support besides just SaaS. In fact, I've got four of them, right? And I can go through them in detail at a later point. It's hard to kind of go into all those details right now. That's what I've been doing for the past 20 years, is trying to figure out how to make open source communities sustainable through market transactions. And there are many ways to do it. It doesn't have to be trading independence for convenience, as is happening with the current rush towards SaaS model AI.
Interesting. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about, this kind of financialization of AI, is a lot of people, on one hand are painting a dystopian picture of AI taking over everything. But I'm also seeing right now at the same time, there are a lot of analysts out there saying that we are in an AI bubble, right? I don't know if you've seen that chart where this is like circular funding between NVIDIA and Microsoft, OpenAI, a bunch of other startups to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, and kind of generating this, some say it's fake demand. So do you think we're in an AI bubble right now?
I do. There's a tremendous amount of money that is not clearly sustainable. And the downside of that is it's displacing actually sustainable approaches that could be taken. Because that's what happens. It's not neutral. When money gets invested and diverted one direction, it doesn't get invested in the other direction. That's actually what causes the bubble and the depression later in the first place, is you're misallocating the resources. Instead of towards sustainably incentivized prosperity, distributed prosperity, you're essentially enabling a few winners to
Mm.
apparently succeed for the moment, while what they're producing is not what people ultimately want for sustained prosperity and happiness.
Interesting. So do you think the bubble, like, why do you think it is a bubble? Is it because the technology is not what they say it is, or is it
Yeah, yes, partly because there is going to be prosperity from AI solutions, but we don't know, should that be multiple data centers? Should data centers be focused in 4 or 5 areas? Should there be distributed compute that's actually put on many people's desktops? You don't know exactly how to distribute all that compute, and a ton is being invested, not because we know that there's going to be buyers for that product, but because of speculation, because they think it might. I would say that that's only going to help us increase dystopia if we have concentrated data centers and concentrated models and concentrated ownership. What we need for a utopian vision of AI-enabled prosperity, is distributed ownership, distributed decision making, and that might lead to some data centers. People could still rent data centers, but not at the accelerated pace we're seeing right now. Likely, it'll be more decentralized data centers, or decentralized edge computing, or people having compute that's distributed all over the planet. So the problem with any kind of bubble is misallocation of resources towards things that don't ultimately result in people buying patterns, people actually wanting that.
right? Well, it seems like one. I mean, if I understand the chart right, it seems like the one entity in the center of all this AI speculation is Nvidia trying to drive up demand for its chips because that is the publicly traded company. Maybe you can help me understand
Well,
exactly
I
what's
don't know
going
if
on there.
NVIDIA is driving. They're certainly in a nice position because they've spent years developing CUDA, essentially. And I know the people that actually convinced Jensen to convert his graphical processing units into tensor units, essentially. And it was a good move. And they built CUDA to make that happen. Now, there are other hardware manufacturers that can do the same thing. But yes, of course, NVIDIA is going to continue to try to drive demand for their product. So, they're doing what any rational actor in the market would do, just try to figure out how to sell more of their product. They have a challenge of, now they actually would want open AI to be everywhere. They want more of their products everywhere else. There are other companies as well. AMD is stepping up and actually has GPUs that are working well, but they need more software support. So there are things the government could do to support a more balanced ecosystem. Very clear things they could do. Unfortunately, there's a lot of money spent on marketing, not necessarily from the hardware manufacturers, but from the investment community that's put trillions of dollars into startups, essentially, that they want to succeed and they want to eventually go public. So there's a lot of messaging from those investors and those corporate owners that tries to convince government that they've got the answer, the next wave. The challenge, and that's always been a challenge of any democracy, is listening to the money as opposed to the people. And how
Right.
do we, one thing that's hopeful is, how do we get the message from the masses actually influencing government policy instead of just the message from the few?
So, I mean, speaking of government, I don't know if you saw, but Sam Altman, I think a couple of days ago, suggested that if there is a bubble and the bubble should pop, the government should act as a quote unquote insurer of last resort to bail out AI if necessary. So, I guess my question, from your perspective, should or do you think the government has any responsibility to step in? Or should these companies be allowed to fail? And kind of more broadly, like, are there any lessons, if I liken back to the 2008 financial crisis, are there any lessons there that could
Oh,
apply to this potential upcoming moment?
there are a lot of lessons from that era. And so NumPy became popular because of that era, actually. A lot of the banks, in response to the crisis, started to use NumPy in order to do better risk assessment. So I'm very, very aware of the response to that crisis, and spent a lot of time in Wall Street talking to investment banks about what they were doing. Learned a lot about what happened there. Absolute moral hazard that can create it. We have a similar situation here. Now, to be fair to Sam, I don't think he was saying the government should bail them out, but he was saying the government should buy more data center hours, right? And the government may need to buy compute hours, that's for sure, but they shouldn't be doing it to bail anybody out, but to support the needs of the government, which might need compute, and that's fine. But there's many providers of that already. I think the hyperscalers are doing a reasonable job. It's kind of the few AI big companies that are being puffed up a bit in their valuations because of user demand for this very interesting human-like conversation AI. But translating that human-like conversation AI experience into an actual automation for work is not as simple as people might think. It's just because you have a conversational AI doesn't mean you can use it as an agent to do a job. And the transition from I can respond intelligently to a conversation to I can actually do a job for you is turning out to be a little harder than people thought. At least some people thought. Actually, those of us who are aware of the technology, we're not. I'm in Jan LeCun's camp. We're a few iterations away from actually getting intelligence at the level that you could actually start to actually replace rational humans. What we have today is a very, very good human language translator and human language creator, and as well as image creator. And so that's great. It's a wonderful tool to enhance and enable humans to do what they do better. Love it. It's not going to replace a bunch of jobs today. Maybe in the future it might. Those are things to concern about. So I think we absolutely have an overinvestment in some things in the AI economy. That's clearly true. I'm not a financial predictor. I don't. You can be right about a trend and not right about when the challenge will come to roost. But even with all of that, there's still today things people can do, which is just don't rely on the loud voices that are being paid for essentially by all that investment money. Instead, trust your own needs and realize there's a huge economy of open source participants, open source models. I actually today believe the open source movement is big enough and strong enough. It's already causing OpenAI to have to release open weight models. There's open weight models coming from other countries, which is causing other people to invest more to create open weight models generally. I feel like we're already going to win with the open source. The only question is, will we have to deal with a lot of economic downturn while we win?
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is that some of the technology that's being marketed by these, what you're calling vertically integrated AI companies, aren't exactly where they need to be in terms of what they're actually selling, right? It's not going to automate full workforces. Or right now it's a language model that basically recognizes or scrapes the internet, that recognizes patterns, is going to split these things back at you, but it's not quite there in terms of actually being creative or being able to make decisions in the way that humans can make. So that's potentially a risk there. And you're saying that there's overinvestment on
It can
that side.
simulate making decisions.
And then on the other
can,
side, you're saying
yeah.
that there's a huge open source ecosystem that's untapped into, that a lot of people aren't paying attention to, that you think could be the long-term winners of AI and actually could be proven to be beneficial and lead to a more healthy functioning society and economy. So before I let you go, I do want to, you touched on a little bit of this, but in terms of your organization, Open Teams, the Open Source AI Foundation, what exactly are you guys working on to steer AI in a direction that you think would be beneficial to society?
Yeah, so the Open Source AI Foundation is a policy group that is a nonprofit we support to help get the message to policymakers. Open Teams is a public benefit corporation. It's a for-profit company, but so that it can grow and it can provide horizontal sovereign AI solutions, horizontally integrated sovereign AI solutions to governments, to organizations, and even individuals eventually. We're not quite there yet to individuals, but to organizations and governments. And so we help them, give them an option, give them a single hand to shake and a single throat to choke as they get accountability for open source delivery.
Great. So where can people learn more about the work that you do? Where do you want people to follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Actually, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn at TE Oliphant. You can go to openteams.com and see elements there. I'm starting a podcast. Eventually, I'll promote that, say in a month or two. But you can follow me on LinkedIn, occasionally on X, but mostly LinkedIn, and then openteams.com. And then I speak at events all the time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Travis, for coming on the show today, and we will see how this all shakes out.
Thanks, James.
Appreciate it.
It's interesting times. It's definitely interesting times.
That is it for me this week. If you want more stories that the mainstream media is unwilling to tell, you can head on over to my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. The link will be in the description below. As always, thank you so much for your time, and keep on tuning into Breaking Points.